When I was growing up in church, we always sang a particular hymn that included the line, Veni Creator Spiritus, come creative spirit. Now, when I was growing up, I interpreted this entirely differently than I do today. When I was growing up, this creative God was something to whom we owed allegiance and obedience. But today I think of it much differently. That creative spirit resides in each of us, and we owe it nothing more than the exercise of our own creativity. In the current socio-political turmoil in America, we have seen many ways of being creative as a form of resistance. One needs to look no further back than the recent March on Science and the clever signs that were being held there to know that creativity as well as humor have a place in the resistance. Creativity is what sustains us. It is the generative quality of our life. I want to share with you one of my very favorite stories of creativity, and one that got me thinking about this whole idea of creativity as being a necessary component of resistance. There are currently teams of hundreds of hackers in over 20 cities in America who are working to archive and save climate data that is currently being removed from federal websites. And they're going even further. They're doing more than just archiving. Coders are building robust software systems to monitor these ongoing changes to government websites. So they're keeping track not only of what has been removed to learn exactly, but they are beginning to learn exactly when the pruning began and to investigate why it was removed. Now, hackers to me are some of the most creative people around, and they have chosen to use this creativity not just to oppose the destruction of this information, but to creatively resist by storing it so that it will be available for future generations. One of the lessons that I take from this is that it is not enough to oppose destruction. We must resist it. We cannot be neutral. And in choosing to resist destruction, we choose acts of creation. And this includes a reverence for all that has been created, including our fragile ecosystem, as well as the bonds of common humanity. Now, this is not always easy work. It requires us to have the capacity not just for creativity, but for the deep sorrow that comes when things have been lost, when we mourn what we cannot save. But it is not enough to mourn. We must create. We must build. We cannot find enough sustenance in simply knowing what we are against. We must know what we are for. The former editor of Poetry magazine, Christian Wyman, says, "Let us remember that in the end we go to poetry for one reason, so that we might more fully inhabit our lives and the world in which we live them. And that if we more fully inhabit these things, we might be less apt to destroy both." Now, Christian was speaking specifically of the role of poetry in resisting destruction. But I think that all art applies, and not just art, but the art we craft from our lives. When we go about our daily lives, when we encounter others, when we make choices about how we perceive ourselves and our place in the world, every time we are given the choice between creation and destruction. Will we make choices that build, sustain, nurture, and grow our souls? Or will we allow that destruction to take place in our hearts? In this moment of Unitarian Universalist history, our denomination requires of us the willingness to be creative, to innovate, to reconcile our failures and our aspirations, to choose new ways of going forward. I hope you will join us in participating in the white supremacy teach-in next week here at the CLF and take that journey with us. Our world, not just our faith, requires both creative solutions and generative healing practices. Many times in recent weeks, I have been reminded of words I heard spoken by then UUA moderator Ginny Corder toward the end of the 2010 General Assembly in Minneapolis. After much difficult debate, the convention had elected to go to Phoenix, Arizona in 2 years' time for a special justice GA. And there was great energy in the hall. I leave you today with these words of hope she offered, spoken here as a meditation and a prayer. Perfectly imperfect, we came here. And I say to you, my friends, there is a new wind here. Here we have learned together many things. Here we have learned that processes that worked well, perhaps in small monocultural New England towns, chafe when we need to use them to bend the world towards justice. Thousands with our roots exposed, perhaps we will be more willing to consider decision-making processes used for centuries in communities that value the health of the group as much as the right of the individual. We have learned so much here. The power of love came and refused to leave until it had dragged us in the streets to witness together. The power of love came to live among us because we made a place for it. It could have gone elsewhere, but it came here. And the power of collaboration came to be here among us. The power of leaders reaching out to people they don't know, telling each other raw, audacious truth about what was at stake. And the power of community came here. Community first with people we had barely met, but then inside our faith. And then community with a commitment that our community can be larger. Our community can be multilingual, multicultural, multi-class, multi-generational, multi-religious. Our community can reach outside of our faith and across borders. All this power, all this love, it came here, but it cannot stay here. There is much to do. Much has been made, but some has been broken. The agreements that bind us are so fragile, so we must be so tender with each other while we find this new way together. This is a time for celebration, but not for triumphalism, for we have not yet arrived. We've only declared our strong resolve to begin again in love. So while we should not underestimate the commitments that we have made here to new ways of being, we must also never, ever underestimate the work, the real work that remains ahead of us. We still have not yet heard each other perfectly. We still are not yet seeing or hearing each other fully. But we can continue to try. We must continue to try. We will try. We are not enough, but we are a fine, fine start.